Welcome to this webinar for training providers on delivering high-quality apprenticeships. By attending, you're giving your consent for this webinar to be recorded and uploaded onto our ESFA YouTube channel, where you can watch it again afterwards. If you change your mind about consent, please dial off. Next slide, please. This webinar has been designed for all training providers offering apprenticeships, and our aim is to demonstrate how you can use the Training Provider Guide and other resources in your organisation. We'll also dip into several key areas along the end-to-end apprenticeship journey to show you how quality is embedded each step of the way. While we can't cover everything in one session, we hope that today will give you a good insight into the apprenticeship journey from beginning to end. We know that today's audience will include both new and more experienced training providers. You may be familiar with some of the content we're presenting, in which case we hope that the session will provide an opportunity to reflect on current practice and areas for continuous improvement. As well as the Training Provider Guide, we've recently published a similar guide for employers called The Road to a Quality Apprenticeship, and one for endpoint assessment organisations will be published soon. This reflects that a high-quality apprenticeship is a four-way partnership between several actors: you, the training provider, the employer, the apprentice, and the endpoint assessment organisation. This partnership will be the first part of today's session, led by Louis Curtis from the Apprentice panel at the Institute for Apprenticeships and Technical Education. Next, we'll hand over to Karen Bennett from ESFA, who will talk about endpoint assessment, before moving on to Joss Parsons from Ofsted. Joss will talk about inspection evaluation criteria, and finally, Eve Oakley and Paul Russell from ESFA will introduce the Apprenticeships Workforce Development Programme Learning. We'll then wrap up with 20 minutes of your questions, chaired by Rob Cole from ESFA. So if you've got anything you'd like to ask, please put it in the question panel on your screen. To begin this session, I'll now hand over to Louis from the IFATE Apprentice panel. Next slide, please.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Louis Curtis. I'm a former apprentice at Aggregate Industries, and I'm a member of the Institute for Apprenticeships and Technical Education's Apprentice panel. And I've been leading on a piece of work called the Best Practice Guidance, which is guidance on apprenticeship delivery made by apprentices. And I'll be talking about the 3/4-way partnership. Next slide, please. So, what is the 3/4-way partnership? To make an apprenticeship successful, everyone needs to be involved. There needs to be a good relationship between the apprentice, the employer, the training provider, and of course, the endpoint assessment organisation. In 2020, the Apprentice panel launched a survey that got over 1,100 responses. And I thought it would be interesting to touch on a couple of the common themes that were hallmarks of poor quality apprenticeships. The first was that the apprentice often seemed to form the only link between their employer and training provider, having to schedule meetings. There was a lack of synergy between on and off the job training, so what they were doing in the workplace didn't necessarily align to what they were doing with their training provider and vice versa. There was poor awareness of the apprentice's progress between the two parties. And then to add another one on there as well, one of the biggest themes of the Apprentice panel survey was a lack of awareness about endpoint assessment. Next slide, please. So as an Apprentice panel, we believe that this partnership, that the success of it is underpinned by a great quality commitment statement. So a commitment statement defines with clear expectations and responsibilities how everyone should work together to achieve full occupational competence for the apprenticeship. And as an Apprentice panel, we put together a few themes which I'll touch on as to how we think you can get the best out of your commitment statement and the tripartite or quad meetings that you have between the apprentice, training provider, employer, and if you can get them, the endpoint assessment organisation. So first of all, follow up on any actions, check the commitment statement and the training plan to see that they're still relevant and to assess whether commitments are being met. Have open and honest feedback between the employer and the training provider on the apprentice's progress, whether that's on their knowledge, skills and behaviours, or whether that's on the stuff that they're doing with the training provider. One of the most important things is to celebrate the achievements of the apprentice. So often I think that there's massive progress, even in a very short period of time, that can be celebrated and discussed and recognised. Of course, talk about what could be better or what's going well, and if there's room for improvement, put in concrete steps and learning objectives to support the apprentice through the next month or time period between your next meeting. Have a clear and open opportunity to ask for the apprentice to ask any questions, highlight concerns, whether it's safeguarding, welfare, stuff that they're struggling with in the workplace, and again, coming back to that point, and support them if they raise those concerns. And then probably one of the most important ones is talk about the endpoint assessment, revisit the sources of the standard and the resources available for endpoint assessment, and start to get those cogs whirring for the last stage of their apprenticeship, and then of course agree clear actions for the next meeting. Next slide, please. So, as I mentioned, the apprentice panel has been working away on creating some guidance for training providers and employers as to how they could improve a few areas, not only the 3/4-way partnership, but also the induction, apprentice welfare, training, endpoint assessment preparation, amongst other things. And we came up with sort of 10 possible ways that either you'll be doing already and it's a sign of what's really good, or maybe some things that you could think about to improve your apprenticeship delivery. So number one is that employers should meet with the training provider before the apprentice even starts, to ensure that there is an awareness of the workplace, any specific things that need to be put in place for the apprentice prior to their start, and to ensure that the training is tailored to the specific needs of the employer and the apprentice. Number two, the commitment statement should go beyond the formal requirements and be personalised towards the apprentice. For example, at the start of my apprenticeship, we sat down with the training provider and employer, and we spoke about what we would expect from each of us and what they would expect from us. And as an apprentice cohort, we all signed off on that, and I thought that was a really, really good bit of good exercise. A clear log of the apprentice's progress, so that it's transparent and accessible for all parties and can be checked in between meetings. There's nothing worse than the apprentice turning up to a meeting and no one having any idea of what they've been doing. I'm sure that only happens in very rare cases. Number four, training providers and employers should be proactive in scheduling regular meetings, and the endpoint assessment organisation should be brought in to discussions early on if possible. Number five, if possible, the training provider or the employer should arrange talks or mentoring with former apprentices or people within their industry who the apprentice can aspire towards. This is very similar to point 7, which is about offering experiences and tours. In the apprentice panel survey and in my own experience, where we got to visit other businesses, see their processes and their practices, it was really good for our wider learning. Number 6 is about apprentices being able to speak up and being empowered if their commitments are not being met, and then to go further than that, if those commitments are not being met, for robust steps to be put in place to get those commitments back on track. Number 8, review the commitment statement, the apprenticeship standard, and also the training plan monthly, to check that that they're on course and that it's relevant. Number 9, encourage apprentices to search their apprenticeship standards on the Institute's webpage and to look up the resources that are on there, because they're really helpful. And number 10, pretty important one, communicate to the apprentice any opportunities, communities or support available from the training provider or the employer. So a lot of people, prospective apprentices, will not choosing the apprenticeship over university because of the fear of missing out, because there might not necessarily be the same social aspects, for example, in an apprenticeship. So if you can advertise any sports clubs or anything like that that's available, any discount cards, then it will make the apprenticeship experience so much better for the apprentice. That's all from me. I'm happy to take any questions at the end. Thank you for listening, and look out for our best practice guidance, which is being launched later this year. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Lewis. So next slide, thank you very much. So if we can go to the next slide. My name's Karen Bennett, and I'm going to discuss endpoint assessment, EPA. I'm going to give you a brief overview of EPA, which is going to be useful for those new to apprenticeship standards, and also to put the roles and responsibilities into context. I'm then going to talk through the actions we're putting in place to ensure high quality EPA in apprenticeships. And finally, I will walk through some of the roles and responsibilities for training providers with regards to EPA covered in the guide. So what is EPA? Now, I really appreciate that a number of people will be already very familiar with this. However, it is worth giving an overview for everyone as it supports the understanding of responsibilities. So EPA allows the apprentice to demonstrate that they have achieved occupational competence. It is the last part of the apprenticeship and will determine if the apprentice passes, what their final grade is, and of course, it earns them the certificate. The apprentice schedule looks like this. So the left-hand box is the time spent on programme. It varies by occupation and level, but will be a minimum of 12 months. The middle box is where the employer and training provider spend time with the apprentice to confirm if they're ready for the final assessment. And the third box is the EPA. EPAs are an independent assessment of the knowledge, skills and behaviour which have been learned throughout an apprenticeship, and test the apprentice's ability to apply them in the workplace. So every apprentice must undertake an assessment at the end of their training to confirm to themselves, their current and potential employers, that they have achieved occupational competence and complete their apprenticeship. Apprentices will not achieve an apprenticeship standard without satisfying all the requirements of its assessment plan, including the EPA. Next slide, please. So I'm going to talk through how we are providing high quality EPA in apprenticeships. The actions I'm going to talk through are in response to feedback from EPAOs, providers, apprentices and employers. We want all stakeholders to be clear of the roles and responsibilities with regards to their roles with EPA and how best to work together to deliver high quality EPA and for high quality experience for all apprentices. All stakeholders to begin to consider EPA requirements in the EPA right at the start of the apprenticeships. The actions we are taking to do this are the creation of the training provider guide to quality apprenticeships, and we're also producing similar guides for EPA for all stakeholders. The guides will help to bring assessment to the front of the apprenticeship journey, and we want everybody to be thinking about it all the way through the programme. So next slide, please. I'm going to talk through some, but it's important to note not all, roles and responsibilities of the provider for EPA all the way through the apprenticeship as outlined in the guide. So right at the start, in the induction, the provider should be explaining how the apprentice will work towards assessment and full occupational competence throughout their apprenticeship, and that passing the assessment is required for them to complete their apprenticeship and get a certificate. At this stage, they should be discussing reasonable adjustments and talking to the employer about selecting an EPAO. Moving on to the delivery stage, it is the role of the provider to keep the EPAO informed of the apprentice's progress and potential timing for EPA. The provider will also support the apprentice to prepare for the final assessment. Examples here include familiarising them with the assessment format and grading criteria, particularly where reasonable adjustments have been made, and holding mock assessments. Finally, an example is around completing the apprenticeship. The provider will need to make sure that all individual learning records, ILR data, is correct for apprentices, and the provider should check that the EPAO has arranged for all apprentices who have completed their final assessments to have certificate sent from the ESFA recognising their achievements. I'm now going to hand over to Joss Parsons from Ofsted. Next slide, please.
Hello colleagues, this is Joss Parsons from Ofsted. I'm going to tell you about Ofsted inspection, which is effectively the assessment of quality of apprenticeship training and what it is we focus on. Next slide, please. The purpose of inspection is to provide an external, independent quality assessment of a provider's education and training provision against a national comparable quality framework. So for inspection read quality assessment, it's external. We're a separate government department. We're independent inspectorate. We inspect against a national comparable quality framework, the education inspection framework. More about that later. We assess the quality of your training in order to ensure that apprentices learn, develop, and progress as they should, to provide useful information for users of your services, and that may be apprentices, future or current, employers, future or current, and anyone else. Crucially, it's also to help you to improvement. Ofsted's strapline is improvement through inspection. We inspect and report, and that's the limit of what we do, but we do help you to improve through inspection, through what we say in our inspections and reports. As part of this, we're effectively assessing the effectiveness of you as leaders and managers and those who have the role of governance as part of this. But crucially also, this is to provide accountability for the use of public money, and that obviously the levy and non-levy and other ESFA funding constitutes public money. And finally, it's to provide quality assessments of providers and their provision for those who need to make funding decisions in relation to providers. And of course, that's ESFA in particular in this circumstance. Next slide, please. What does inspection involve? It's a professional conversation between us, the inspectors, who are obviously trained as inspectors, come from a similar background to yourselves. You as senior managers and leaders, your staff, your training staff, your apprentices, and your employers. As part of this, we will visit and observe the training going on of apprentices, mainly off the job, but also on the job. We will talk with apprentices about their programme experiences and progress. We'll talk with employers about their experience and satisfaction. We'll review apprentices' work, so we'll be actually looking at the assessment record you make and talking through that with the apprentices and employers. We'll be evaluating how effectively required knowledge, skills and behaviours that are in the apprenticeship standard are being developed and progressed. And what do you get from this? You get a published report that highlights the strengths and areas of improvement identified during the inspection. You can see similar reports to providers like yourselves. If you go into reports Ofsted, just bang in reports and Ofsted in your search engine and you'll get it. Next slide, please. Monitoring visits. Now, the first time you'll encounter us, if you're a new provider and have been delivering only since April 2017, will be a monitoring visit. You may have one already, but if not, this is how you'll experience Ofsted for the first time. So, and you'll normally receive that within 24 months of starting to deliver this provision. Now, some of these timescales I give here are being extended because of the impact of COVID, but they generally apply. When we say within, that's any time within that timescale. So your monitoring visit in 24 months, you'll then receive a full inspection. That's the much bigger thing within 24 months, the monitoring visit. Should you receive one or more insufficient progress judgments, then your full inspection is likely to be sooner. And we might carry out full inspection directly in any case. But there will always be 2 working days notice of a monitoring visit or inspection. So if it's to be on the Tuesday and Wednesday, we will notify you first thing on the Friday beforehand. On a monitoring visit, we'll use the following progress judgments: insufficient, regional, or significant progress. And we'll make it against these three themes: leadership and management, quality of training, and safeguarding. And a monitoring visit will result in a published report. Next slide, please. Now, once you've had your monitoring visit, then you've had your full inspection. The timing of the next inspection and the type of inspection will be determined by your overall effectiveness grade. And at a full inspection, which is where you get these summary grades, you will either be graded for overall effectiveness, outstanding, good, requires improvement, which means not yet good, or inadequate. So if you find you're outstanding, you'll then get a shorter, briefer inspection within 6 years. If you find a provider is good, they'll usually receive a short inspection within 5 years. If you find a provider requires improvement, not yet good, normally come back again, inspect within 30 months, but also carry out a monitoring visit in the interim. If you find you to be inadequate and you only deliver apprenticeship provision, will not normally inspect you, because this would usually mean that the provider will not usually continue to be funded or remain on the register of apprenticeship training providers. Judgments about funding and registration are a matter for ESFA and not Ofsted, but that's the usual outcome. We used various intelligence or information which is relevant or valid to assess a risk and consider whether we might need to carry out an earlier inspection or monitoring visit. And just to say, these timescales may be extended because of COVID. Next slide, please. I referred to the Education Inspection Framework. That's the national quality framework against which we inspect. There's the link there. You will get an overall effectiveness grade: outstanding, good, requires improvement, inadequate. We also grade quality of training, behaviour and attitudes, personal development of apprentices, and leadership and management. And the leadership and management grade includes a judgment on whether safeguarding arrangements are effective or not. Please note, whether on a monitoring visit or on inspection, be it full or short, we always make a judgment about safeguarding. That is something you'll want to be ready for. On a full inspection, we also grade your apprenticeship provision, and if you're delivering adult learning or some other program, we'll also grade that. And the main source for inspection process and our evaluation criteria is the inspection handbook. There's the link. Next slide, please. How do inspectors evaluate apprenticeships? Set out here on this slide are word for word the evaluation criteria inspectors use. And basically, inspectors are considering how well leaders and managers ensure the apprenticeship curriculum or offer or program, or call it what you will, meets the principles and requirements of an apprenticeship. And that will include assessing the extent to which a provider's staff engage with employers. You've heard about the commitment statement, absolutely crucial relationship to make for a good quality apprenticeship. Is the commitment statement being completed and worked through and acted on? Are you planning initial assessment so you know from what basis apprentices are progressing? Have you planned out the training, the assessment, the review points, additional qualifications? Are you monitoring and supporting apprentices, including those with special educational needs, to progress quickly? Are you ensuring they're gaining new knowledge, skills and behaviours to achieve their full potential, and not just confirming existing knowledge, skills and behaviours? There need to be substantial new knowledge, skills and behaviours in there. Inspectors will also judge how well trainers, assessors and coaches and mentors and your training and teaching staff across the whole communicate up-to-date vocational and technical subject knowledge, so they can ensure it reflects industry practice, meets employers' needs, ensuring apprentices get the occupational competence they need. Inspectors will determine whether apprentices acquire that knowledge effectively and that they can demonstrate required skills and behaviours, not only to complete their apprenticeship, but to get to their next steps. Whether within their career aims, that's progress in their intended job roles, it's promotion, it's progress to sustained employment, or whether it's moving on to a high level of apprenticeship training or qualification, be what it may. We expect you to have ambition on behalf of the apprentices to what their reasonable next steps can be. And key, finally, inspectors will also consider whether arrangements for safeguarding young people and vulnerable adults are appropriate and effective. Next slide, please. When we make, as I said, on the full inspection, we'll make key judgments as well as overall effectiveness. Quality of training is really our weightiest judgment. That's what we're focusing on. And first of all, we've got these 3 I's: intent, implementation, impact. But it's all one. It's all about the quality of the training you're delivering. Now, is the intent of your curriculum, the intent of your offer, is it meeting the needs of apprentices and employers? And is it meeting the needs of the local, regional and national economy? That's a key thing. Are you designing your offer to meet those needs, to be structured in a way that ensures that you build upon the existing assessed knowledge, skills and behaviours of your apprentices, so you can build on them as building blocks of knowledge and skills, and that is committed to long-term memory. So it's not just teaching to the test that they forget in a few weeks' time. It needs to be embedded in your apprentices' memory, so that when they come to various stages of assessment, that they will retain and be able to articulate those knowledge, skills and behaviours. We'll be assessing implementation. That's how the training works, how you deliver that knowledge effectively, how well it's structured and sequenced, and how you assess the progress of apprentices. And of course, as part of this, the impact, the attainment. Do they achieve? Do they pass? But above and beyond this, do they progress? Do they achieve their destinations, their next steps? And you're obviously partly responsible for that. How do their knowledge and skills develop? Other judgments, behaviour and attitudes. Are apprentices developing the right attitudes to learning, to work, to employment? Are they attending? Are they punctual? Do they respect their peers, fellow apprentices, trainers and other staff and customers and everyone they work with? Personal development, absolutely crucial. You could call it the wider curriculum. It's all those, sometimes called softer skills, but just as important as the vocational knowledge. The ability to be able to do things, the resilience, the ability to work alone, the ability to work as a team, the ability to serve customers. Are you preparing them for the next stage in all these ways and enriching that experience with exposure to work experience, etc., and the variety of that. Careers guidance to ensure they're going the right way, and if they want to change direction, advice on that. And ensure that they're also contributing as a good citizen. Of course, always in an age-appropriate way. Leadership and management, the vision and ambition you bring, the learning environment you establish, the development of your staff so they have continuous professional development, that their well-being is considered, that students' well-being and experience is a good one. That you ensure there's some kind of governance or oversight over what you do, a critical friend of some sort who can give you an external insight into that. And of course, crucially, safeguarding. Next slide, please. Safeguarding, I've just attached there, and you'll get the slides later, some recommended reading about safeguarding, prevent duty, etc. I'm just very keen that you ensure you're well prepared for that. Next slide, please. And there's a typical inspection timetable, 2 working days notice. Then if it's a monitoring visit or a short inspection, we're on site for 2 days. If it's a full inspection, we're on site for 3 or 4 days. Inspector does final feedback. We send the report to you for factual accuracy check, comes back, we take those into account, report is published. Next slide, please. Roles and responsibilities of the nominee. One thing we do ask is that you appoint a nominee who will be the liaison person with the inspection team, who needs to have a detailed understanding of your organisation, be sufficiently senior to ensure the cooperation of staff at all levels throughout, have the authority to carry out their role with autonomy. You may be thinking, oh, that's me, but or you may be thinking, oh, it's one of my colleagues. But it's someone who needs to be able to liaise with the lead inspector to support inspection planning, brief your own staff about arrangements, inform apprentice employers, attend the team meetings with the inspectors and hear the emerging findings, able to challenge back, coordinate feedback arrangements during and the end of the inspection, liaise with the inspectors to ensure they've got the documents and they can meet with staff, apprentices, employers as necessary. Next slide, please. And just finally, we're keeping our inspection process under review. If you have any queries about what you've heard or about inspection generally, please email us on this email address, fes@ofsted.gov.uk. And if you need to update your contact information or anything you need to let us know about, please use this. And finally, we have two types of inspector. We have our full-time HMI inspectors and we have part-time Ofsted inspectors. And they're very often drawn from the sector, people like you whose day job is training or training managing, etc., as a leader or manager, bringing up absolutely essential expert and up-to-date experience of apprenticeship training. If you're interested in being an inspector and get the training in our quality assessment, please make an expression of interest at this email address. Thank you. Next slide, please.
Thank you, Joss. Hello, everyone. My name is Eve Oakley. I work in the Apprenticeships policy team, and I'm joined today by my colleague, Paul Russell. And we're really pleased to have this opportunity to let you know about a new set of professional development materials, specifically for apprenticeships providers, that we've been working on in partnership with the Education and Training Foundation. So we do have a video to show you, and I'm going to ask if we can please start loading the video, as it does take a little while to load. And in the meantime, I will talk a little bit more about the content. Just to note as well that the video will automatically cut me off when it starts. So if this does happen when I'm mid-flow, then I will pick up again from that point straight after the video.
Apprenticeships have always been central to the development of the UK's technical and industrial workforce. Driven by technological advancements, digitisation and a drive for sustainability and a net zero carbon economy, whole industry sectors are undergoing fundamental transformations. Developments in areas such as genetics, artificial intelligence, nanotechnology, automation, renewables and robotics will drive occupational change at a pace we haven't seen previously. These areas will drive reskilling, upskilling and a fresh approach to training, teaching, learning and skills development. Apprentices need to understand the interoperability of the knowledge, skills and behaviours that they will develop and to understand their value across occupations and industry sectors. The way that we train and assess apprentices will change as quickly as the roles that they will enter. We need to work in ever closer partnership with industry and employers to ensure that we develop and assess gateway and work-ready skills in our apprentices. Through this course, we'll consider the apprenticeship journey, from induction to gateway and then endpoint assessment, and how every step can be informed by effective practice, industry insights and enabling technologies. The course will build your confidence to deliver excellent apprenticeship teaching and training. It will inspire and excite you with regards to the world of work.
Thank you. So that worked quite quickly, which is good. If we can move to the next slide, please. So the materials include a suite of online training modules developed specifically for apprenticeship training providers. Hopefully the video has given you a little taste of what's included. All of the training is free to access. It's delivered via the online platform FutureLearn. The link is on the slides here, and as my colleagues have said, we will be circulating these to you afterwards. We also commissioned a series of webinars on strategic leadership and management aimed at leadership positions in training providers. These are delivered by AELP in partnership with AOC, and these have been really popular so far. The content of the training materials is based on a review of evidence that we gathered about the quality of apprenticeships delivery, particularly from Ofsted and also from providers, apprentices and employers. The key findings were that providers and their workforce would benefit from training to support them through the transition from apprenticeship frameworks to the more exacting apprenticeship standards. And this is all the more important as more and more standards become available. There's a need to support experienced training providers through this transition, but also those who are new to the profession, many from industry, and a significant number of training providers who are new to delivering apprenticeships in particular. The online training has an element of interactivity and facilitation, which together with providing greater detail, builds on the guidance products. So the current slide is showing the different topics that are covered. A key change in the move to standards is the new focus on teaching rather than assessing. So we have a strong focus in the online modules on teaching methods and understanding how people learn. We've linked this to preparation for endpoint assessments, also a relatively new feature of apprenticeships. EPA is a crucial step in recording apprentices' achievements and setting them up for their future progression. Another module covers curriculum design, which needs to evolve from the baseline information set out in the standard and be developed in collaboration with the employer. The learning is generic in that it is relevant to all standards and levels, and it provides a practical perspective. And finally, we have a module on how to manage apprenticeships effectively. This helps to support providers through the process of working with an employer to deliver a well-planned, high-quality experience for both the apprentice and the employer. These are all flexible online courses and you can do them at a time to suit you. They do, however, offer substantial professional development with 8 hours of self-guided learning recommended over 4 weeks. You are encouraged to share your reflections and experiences with others on the course, and you will also complete an independent learning plan to support a deeper understanding of your chosen topic. If we can move to the next slide, please. I'm pleased that we've had really positive feedback from the online modules and the strategic leadership course. We're going to continue hosting the online material, certainly until the end of this year, and we will be able to run another series of the strategic leadership webinars so that if anybody on the course is on the waiting list for those, which we know we have, you will be able to benefit from those. We're really keen to build on this and to work with providers, including yourselves, to identify other areas where we can help to upskill the apprenticeships workforce. Our aim is to ensure that all training is relevant and accessible to all providers and their workforces. We're currently looking at areas for further training, and we'd be really delighted to hear if you have any ideas about what a future training offer should cover. You can contact me direct. My contact details are on the slides and will be shared after the session. Thank you.